Hello and welcome. You're tuned into CNBC TV 18 Prime. Let's get cracking on a brand new edition of The Big C with me, Manisha Gupta and Nigel D'Souza. Your daily dose of commodities, cryptos and currencies. But what are we focusing on today, Nigel?
Well, on the show today, we'll put the spotlight on the cryptocurrency space, where the US Senate has passed its first significant vote towards the final approval of the Genius Act, which will regulate the stablecoin users. We'll be joined in by Himanshu Maradiya, the founder and chairman at SIFTAC.
Well, not just that, we'll also take the discussion forward with the Rabobank's Carlos Meira. Coffee pricing and Trump's baseline 10% tariffs. Are we looking at rising prices and where are the sales headed? Answers to all of that and lots more over the next half an hour.
Well, we've got a couple of exciting conversations, but first up, let's do a quick check on all the global markets overnight. On Wall Street, the S&P 500, well, it saw its first negative session in 4, as did the tech-heavy Nasdaq. Well, the moves, however, were largely flat, with a bit of a negative bias, despite the headline inflation print for the month of May. Well, that came in softer than expected. It logged just a 0.1% uptake, which was lower than what most analysts were estimating. The street now closely is eyeing the producer price print that's due later today, which is expected to rise by around 0.3% for the month. Well, stock futures, however, well, they're mirroring those lukewarm moves that we saw overnight, and they're more or less flattish with a bit of a negative tinge. On the other hand, investors will also be keeping a close watch on the trade developments between the United States and China, as negotiations between the two economic mights assume center stage for the rest of this week as well. And in terms of key stock moving action out there, we'll be watching out for key earnings, where Oracle that reported a solid set of numbers. The guidance as well was fairly optimistic, and that stock was up close to around 7% in after hours on the back of that solid beat, both on the top as well as on the bottom line. Well, getting back to the Asian markets, though, we had muted trade across the board. We had Japan's Nikkei that closed down close to around 0.6%, while it was absolute a flat close for the Shanghai at lunch hour. Coming back home to Dalal Street, the Nifty ended closer to the lowest point. In fact, at this point of time, it's trading sub, Manisha, that 25,100 odd level. So a bit of subdued trade in terms of the equity market action, but crude, that's the one that's been boiling up overnight.
Oh, yes. Crude on a boil has been a headline for some days now. And we can't help but miss that, because in the overnight markets, we've seen the crude oil prices gain up by 4.5% to 5% for various crude varieties. Now, the escalating tensions between US and Iran is largely responsible for this action in case of crude oil prices. The Brent crude shot up by 5% overnight and is trading at a 2-month highs even now. Meanwhile, the U.S. crude is comfortably perched at those 10-week highs on your screens. Additionally, we also had the crude inventory data in the U.S. showing that the oil stocks fell by 3.6 million barrels in the week gone by. This is much higher than the 2 million barrels that the street perhaps was estimating. As we marked earlier, geopolitics has a role to play in the pricing action that's unfolding in the overnights. Now, the U.S. President Donald Trump has indicated that the U.S. personnel are now being moved out of West Asia, calling the region a dangerous place, adding that the U.S. will not allow Iran to hold a nuclear weapon. The reports are also suggesting that the U.S. is preparing a partial evacuation on the Iraqi embassy amid the heightened risks there. Remember, Iraq is OPEC's #2 crude producer following Saudi Arabia. And that's not all. Apart from the crude oil prices, let's also take a look at the gold prices. And the yellow metal has been slightly on an uptick there. That is on the back of softer than expected inflation print in the U.S. That has given a fillip to gold. Not just that, the greenback has now hit a 7-week lows, keeping the safe haven sentiment intact. In fact, in the last 1 month, the dollar has declined by 2.6%. And in the last 1 year, the dollar has seen a steeper fall of 6.5%. The precious metal has also surpassed the euro as the second largest asset in the global central bank reserves, largely driven by the buying in record numbers and inflationary trends. According to the ECB note, well, the gold bullion accounted for roughly 20% of the global official reserves, outstripping euro 16% and second only to the US dollar at around 46%. The central bank gold holdings have hit 36,000 tons as of 2024. This is the second highest number since mid-1960s, when the gold was holding 38,000 tons in sense of holding with many of these central banks.
Interesting moves out there. But as promised, let's put the spotlight back on cryptos. We have Himanshu Maradiya, the founder and chairman at Sifdac, who joins us on the show. Hi, Himanshu. Good to have you on the show. Thanks a lot for joining in. Well, overnight, the big news is that the US Senate has passed its first significant vote towards the final approval of the Genius Act to regulate US stablecoin issuers. Could you tell us your reading of this? It's clearly a big move in the direction of cryptocurrencies as well as stablecoin users. Please go ahead.
Certainly. Thank you so much for inviting me for the show. And yes, definitely it marks like a great milestone for crypto industry overall. But since the time of campaigning, President Donald Trump was quite pro-crypto and he was in favor of bringing favorable regulations when it comes to this asset class. And certainly, soon after becoming president, he's acting as well on each and every front. So, Genius Act definitely defines a new era in the domain of stable coins. Many other US banks are also exploring and following that path. And as we know, the stablecoin brings so many opportunities to, help this asset class grow further. So it's definitely a positive move.
Himanshu, also there have been very supportive statements coming in from the US Treasury Secretary as well, and they're all looking at expanding the dollar in sense of stable coin moves there. For the people who are listening to us, well, stable coins are those altcoins or cryptocurrencies where the cryptocurrency is backed by a fiat currency or an asset class or another crypto or an algorithm. So clearly in that sense, it is less volatile and something that the US has been moving quite strongly on. So Himanshu, while of course it works for US and the kind of statements that we've seen coming in, the kind of numbers that stable coins have put out have been quite on the stronger side. Would you say a faster passing of legislation coming in for this one, given the fact that we've seen Senate already pass this?
Yeah, certainly. And also it supports the, vision of Mr. Donald Trump to make US the cryptocurrency capital of the world. Like the way back, maybe 20, 25 years back, they made US Silicon Valley. So maybe like it's moving towards making US crypto valley of the world, which is a very, I would say, progressive move.
Himanshu, we also do understand that India also perhaps is looking to make a paper very fast, and June perhaps could be that month. I mean, that's the kind of statements we've been hearing from authorities, even from Supreme Court for that matter. What is in this paper? Would it also align with what international markets are doing in sense of making their own digital currencies or crypto papers?
See, it was in first 100 days agenda of this current government to present a discussion paper on regulation of cryptocurrency in India. Now, in the month of June, it is coming up, which is again a very positive sign, and it will help Indian crypto market to come out of uncertainty and move towards national framework to regulate cryptocurrency in India. And it is actually very much required because, as Supreme Court mentioned, that India should expedite to bring regulation because in 2023-2024, India has led the world in crypto adoption. As of now, I would say a few good millions of people are there who are kind of, very much into crypto in India, and it's growing very fast. At the same time, if regulation comes, then definitely good talents moving out of India, maybe blockchain developers, which is kind of, like a great potential when it comes to India, or the entrepreneurs who are kind of moving out of India, that can also be prevented. So definitely, and government will save a lot on taxation, which is going because of offshore trading. And there are a lot many factors which can be addressed well, but this is the right time to now regulate crypto in India.
All right, Himanshu, give us a couple of numbers then with regard to the stablecoin market, which has clearly been picking up pace. We had a few numbers that were up on the screen. How do you see this market evolve globally? The number of transactions itself in the past year was much higher than what we've seen in the past. Tell us your numbers that you're working with.
Yeah, so see, US government is backing fiat-backed stablecoins, not really algorithmic stable coins like happened in past with Terra Luna. So they are backing the fiat-backed stable coins. So it's like when fiat currency era had been there, so USD was like dominating fiat currency. So on the same vision, they are coming up with stable coin regulations so that again it is back to US dollar. So ultimately, US dollar becomes the dominance again. So that's how they have been regulating. And yes, with stable coins in last 2 to 3 years, we have seen numbers of USDT, USDC growing to a great extent. And just before a week or maybe 10 days, Circle, which is a parent company of USDC, got listed on Nasdaq with a great valuation and get great appraisal. So it's all going on quite positive for stablecoin markets.
Oh, it absolutely is. But Himanshu, apart from that as well, after Bitcoin spot ETFs and Ether spot ETF, is Solana coming soon as well? Because that, again, has been yet another news in the overnight markets.
Yeah, so many more good major cryptos ETFs are in line, and in more countries other than US as well, in multiple countries, ETFs are coming up for major cryptos. So it's all brings institutional adoption in the asset class.
Himanshu, would be interesting for the viewers to understand on where do you see the highest participation when it comes to blockchain and crypto. I know for the longest time we kept discussing on how India was moving the fastest. I mean, that is not the case now with all those taxes, etc. But is it still Asia, or you think US has definitely taken a lead?
So as per me, there are two probabilities, out of which, because of the favorable regulations that US is acting upon, and that too very fast. So there is a great potential that US takes the lead in crypto market. No doubt, as of now, Southeast Asia is picking up quite well in last 1 to 1.5 years. But the favorable regulations that US is moving towards. So there is a great possibility that US officially becomes the crypto value of the world.
Adoption is something, that is being looked forward to, Himanshu. But the problem is acceptance is, still stuttering out there. Various financial advisors as well, they hesitate to pitch it because of the kind of questions that they get. What would you have to say to that?
So I would say like that time was before maybe 3 to 4 years. But now even most of the people are quite clear about this asset class, and even if few people are still not clear, then they are just sticking to the old kind of, like old school thought, I would say. Okay, but it's been 4 years that I have been advocating blockchain.
Do you believe acceptance is picking up then, Himanshu?
Acceptance is picking up, and it's picking up very fast. And in today's conversation, if someone I'm talking to, and if they tell me that it's future, then I always tell them that it's present, but because you are telling it future because you are living in past.
Right. Nigel, there was a Google trend that was thrown up which said that 5 years earlier, it was what was most Googled was what is Bitcoin and should I own it? Now the latest trending question is how much Bitcoin can I have in my portfolio? So clearly...
Perfect. Yeah.
So Himanshu, yes, we've clearly moved on from there. But before we wind up this conversation, Himanshu, I have one more question. So while we keep talking about rules and regulations and those blockchain and crypto papers that India is making, many Asian countries are making as well, this is a conversation. This is when India was chairing G7 meet as well, that there needs to be a one global paper on crypto, because cryptos and blockchain are without the boundary borders rather. Do you see that happen? Is there work being done on that?
So again, there should be a balance between centralized government and decentralized economy, which has to be adopted. Definitely more and more countries or regions are moving towards regulating this asset class. As per my understanding, around 28 regulators are there across the world, regulating almost 67 to 70 countries. But that is at country or the region level. Definitely, as it was promoted by our finance minister in the G20 kind of presidency, that there should be global framework as well. So again, it is followed like fiat. In fiat also, every country has their own fiat currency, but definitely there is international framework as well when the currency moves from one country to another country. So that also has to be regulated and reported. So there is crypto reporting framework as well, but that needs to be strengthened and the data has to be shared. So it will come up and it should come up.
Himanshu, really appreciate your time here at CNBC TV 18 Prime. And well, yes, crypto really seems to be moving quite fast there. The participation adoption has been on the higher side. And the way the US markets really seem to be moving, we almost are looking at stablecoin getting that nod. That is also because it is backed by US dollars. So we are looking at huge numbers continuing there. Well, so much so that at one point in time in 2024 rather, we saw MasterCard and Paytm numbers. Stablecoin actually did much better than those as well put together. So we're looking at very, very strong numbers there in sense of transitions and transfers as well. But well, that's all about crypto. We'll step it to a short break. On the other side, we'll be joined by Rabobank's Carlos Mira. Stay tuned for that conversation. Welcome back. Time now to take the discussion forward with Carlos Mira. He's head of agri-commodity market research at Rabobank. Carlos, hi, welcome. And let's talk about coffee first. And that's the second most had beverage after water, nearly 2.5, 2.8 billion cups every day across the world. And we've seen the prices quite volatile in 2024. 25 is no different. How do you look at the prices currently, where we have seen a bit of a profit taking more for Robusta rather than Arabica?
Yeah, we certainly came off the peaks that we saw earlier this year. Certainly, of course, earlier this year we had historical high prices. And that was a combination of factors, right? The main concern was the lower Arabica crop in Brazil. We are looking at a crop that will be 5 million bags lower than the year before. Our expectation is 38, 39 million bags of Arabica. That's down from 44 million bags a year ago, which was already a low crop. So this is the fifth consecutive disappointing crop out of Brazil. But on top of that, we have a number of other factors in the market. We had massive delays in the shipping, disruptions, lack of availability of containers. Now, with the trade wars, since January, there was an expectation in the market, in the shipping market, that there was going to be increasing availability of containers as the world will be facing less global trade. This is good for moving coffee around. However, in the last few days, the prices for containers has been going up again because there are a lot of empty containers, but not in places where they are needed. And companies are thinking about shipping for Christmas, and they need to move those containers. So prices have been going up. The expectation for less global growth is still there. It should still benefit coffee shipments, but it's not in the spot market today, just yet. It's something, an alleviation that will be coming in the future. And on top of that, there were a number of other issues pushing higher coffee prices higher. One is the tariff in the US that created a rush to import coffee into the US. And we have seen also a similar rush to import into the EU ahead of the original implementation deadline of the EU deforestation regulation that was last December. Now, all those factors combine to push prices very, very high. We are seeing a retracement from those levels. A couple of reasons for that. One is that even though the Arabica crop in Brazil is not very good, the Robusta crop is at a record level. We are looking at around 25, 26 million bags of Robusta, quite a significant increase on previous years. And also the Vietnamese Robusta crop is developing more or less normally. So the weather has been cooler, it has been rainier than last year. So we are expecting a a recovery in the volumes of Robusta in the two largest Robusta producers in the world. That should bring prices of Robusta a little bit lower.
Okay.
We're also seeing more coffee turning up at the exchange to be graded by the exchange.
Yeah.
There's a very strong inverse correlation between the certified stocks, exchange certified stocks, and prices. So that also should bring some relief to the market. And the final thing pushing prices lower is that demand is not doing very good.
Oh.
And there are a number of data points that we can look at.
All right.
So, for example, in Brazil, which is the second largest consumer, if we don't take the EU market as one market, we have then the US, and then Brazil not very far off from the US market in terms of volumes consumed. And the Association of Brazilian Roasters announced that in April, sales were 16% lower than a year ago. That's quite a significant amount in such a large market. Now, I think it's probably more...
Carlos, I would say the positive, though, is that the prices are coming off. I mean, that is a good news for consumers, isn't it, Nigel?
Yeah, that's right. Carlos, give us a couple of numbers then. You know, pricing as of now, as you said, the various factors at play could pull down the prices a little bit. So what is the broad range we should work with?
I think the trend is likely to continue to be lower. I think we might see something around 310 by the end of the year. So it's still quite a significant drop from current levels, more than 10%. However, we are still in an environment of low inventories. I think it's going to be quite choppy from here. So downward trend, but there's still a lot of choppiness in the market.
That's about coffee, but I want to move to cocoa as well. And Carlos, since you mentioned Christmas and the kind of demand that we will start looking ahead of that, we've seen cocoa prices also gain very strongly. We hit all-time highs in the last year, but since then there is some crop that has started coming in. There also has been some demand destruction because of those very high prices. Where would you look at the prices now by the end of this year?
It's very difficult to say because demand destruction in cocoa has not been as much as expected.
Okay.
It has been there, certainly, but not as much as expected. So we also expect a downward trend in cocoa prices, but it's very hard for me to give a number at this point. The crops have improved versus a year ago, but not significantly. What we do see, however, in cocoa, a lot of projects, especially in Latin America, to grow very, very significant areas with cocoa trees. So suddenly we have to expect a downward trend, but it's very hard whether cocoa will be at 7,000 by the end of the year or 8,000. But in principle, I will expect lower prices than today.
Carlos, coming on sugar as well, because the raws are trading at a 4-year lows and the Indian prices have continued to decline as well. It's expected to be a very good crop in the next season from Brazil, from India, Thailand, the major producers.
Yeah, that's right. We're expecting relatively good crops overall. In Brazil, the amount of sugar cane might be a little bit lower than last year, but the conversion should favor more sugar in detriment of ethanol because ethanol prices are quite depressed. So we have seen that driving sugar prices lower. My personal expectation is that the down move has been a little bit exacerbated. If we look at the last spike in 2023, there was quite a significant increase in prices that has not resulted in major investments in the sugar sector. I would say the sugar sector is a little bit unloved. And if we see any uptick in demand, maybe because China starts importing a little bit more sugar, now that they have been controlling the imports of sugar syrup, they might import some raws. That could very easily support the market.
All right, Carlos, what about the global demand-supply dynamics for sugar? How is that placed currently, and how is it likely to pan out?
Well, as you mentioned, we have relatively good production in Thailand. I don't think it's excellent. We have seen a limited increase in production in the last harvest. That disappointed to a great extent. We were expecting a little bit more. This coming season, we might see more or less similar levels or even a bit more. India, as you know, always has a relatively large margin of error. There's an expectation that India will increase production significantly in the coming season, but previous expectations on the Indian crop has always been attached to a relatively large margin of error. I think the government might be very conservative, allowing exports because of what happened earlier this year, where they allowed 1 million tons of export quota, and that could not be filled because the harvest disappointed.
Oh, well.
And then in Brazil, we are only expecting a little bit more sugar production. So I think it's going to be a relatively neutral balance sheet globally.
Absolutely. A final question then, and Carlos, have the tariffs impacted a lot? Because as you mentioned, US has shipped in a lot of commodities ahead of those tariffs, and we didn't know what would impact how much. Is the tariffs really impacting the markets even now?
Oh, yeah. I think on some commodities, like for example, coffee and probably cocoa as well, the threat of even higher tariffs is still there. Right, like for example, Vietnam, Indonesia, and I think Ghana as well. They were going to be affected with even higher tariffs, the reciprocal tariffs that they could be reinstated in July, depending whether the US and those countries are right to negotiations. So we are seeing the US is still interested in absorbing a little bit more of these commodities. But also tariffs has a number of effects on commodities. One is the dollar weakness that, for example, if we look at the dollar, it's about 6% higher versus the end of 2024 versus other developed market currencies. Weak dollar, higher prices for dollar-denominated commodities. 101 here.
Yes.
So that's one impact. And the other impact is that the products that the US exports, which are grains and oilseeds, might tend to accumulate a little bit more in the US, and particularly soybeans. We don't see any sales of soybeans to China at the moment.
Oh, yes,
even
there's
though
just so much.
Yeah.
As you mentioned, Carlos, there's just so much to watch out for, from dollar index to crop to tariffs to shipping to, and of course, the demand going forward as well. Well, that's about cocoa, coffee, and sugar. And Nigel, we believe by the time it's Christmas, you'll be looking at lower prices from here. At least that's what Carlos from Rabobank is telling us. Carlos, thank you so much for joining in with your sense on all of those commodities there. And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of The Big C. Stay tuned. We'll get you more news and more information on the other side.